Hello, welcome to Season 7 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season, our theme is the current state of horror. We'll be watching 20 or so movies from the last couple of years, reviewing them like normal, and then also talking about some of the larger trends we see. If you want to see the list and follow along, check out our website at thehorrific.com. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Well, this was a weird one.
Yeah, to say the least.
So typically, after we watch one of these movies, I have various levels of confidence in my own understanding of it. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes stuff will happen. Like, since this whole quarantine thing started, we've gone through this routine every time I start a movie for the podcast. And I put it on, and Sarah goes, "How bad do you think this will be?"
Yeah.
And I say, "I don't know. I haven't seen it." And then she says, "Oh, well, did you pick this one or did Bryce?" And I say, neither one of us. We worked on a list together before the season started. She goes, "Oh, what's this one about?" And I said,
wait, does she think I pick out the bad ones?
I don't know. The thing is, she's not even listening. She's just sitting there on her phone, and this is just like her default, I'm starting conversation after you've started a movie that you need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I don't understand why. But anyway, this is a thing that happens over and over. Right. So a lot of times, especially at the beginning of a movie, I end up missing some stuff because I'm being asked questions.
Yeah.
And sometimes, well, basically every time afterwards, I'll go back and look at the Wikipedia page and read through it to make sure I didn't miss anything. Mm-hmm. So like when we did the Child's Play episode, when I watched that movie, I went back and I read, because I had a part in my notes about, well, why did he have to program the doll to be evil if the doll learned to be evil from the people it saw? And then I read in Wikipedia, he had actually just removed like the safety buffers or something. It's like, okay, well, that makes a thing make more sense in the movie. So now that I'm kind of going through my notes and figuring out what I want to talk about, it makes more sense. On this one, I was like, I really need to read the Wikipedia page because I have no idea what just happened. And then I read the Wikipedia page and I thought, well, I'm in trouble for this episode because I still have no idea what just happened.
If you have no idea what happened, then we as a podcast are screwed. I never know what's going on, man. But I'm
this
okay
might be
with
a fun one. Yeah. It sets us up for more room to improvise.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I will introduce it, and then we can get into it.
Let's do it.
In 2018, Dark Sky Films brought us Possum, a psychological horror film written and directed by Matthew Holness. This movie follows a man who has a puppet consisting of a mannequin head with spider legs as he returns to his hometown and suffers a psychological breakdown. If a well-explained story is what you're after, steer clear of this one, but it is creepy AF. If you cry, I start over. This movie received mostly positive reviews from a couple of festivals and had a very limited release in just a few theaters for a short time, but it can now be streamed on Amazon Prime Video at no additional charge.
Very good at that.
Did you learn anything about this movie? Because I found very little about it.
Yeah, so I didn't, not about this movie, but I kind of have a fun fact about Sean Harris, who played the main character in the film.
Oh, okay.
So Sean Harris is a really intense actor. I got that from Wikipedia for the record. But there's approach that you could do to acting, which they call Stanislavski's system, which is like a systematic approach to train actors. Basically, Russian theater practitioner Stanislavski, however you pronounce it, developed in the first half of the 20th century. Basically, it's like almost like, you guys should read about it if you're interested in that kind of thing, but it's almost like ties into like the conscious to your conscience when acting, and like, I don't know, you'll just have to read about it. But I think you have like actors who are they say like method actors.
Yeah.
Like there's that rumor going around about Shia LaBeouf like getting the actual tattoos that his character has in this next movie, which I don't know if it's true or not, but it's like supposed it's super, method acting.
Yeah, it seems like the type of thing you do.
Which that's what this kind of seems like, but it has some other like psychological techniques that are tied into it. So like if a movie's being filmed, he does an interview, like it's very like just straightforward. But anyways, I'll spell it out. It's Stanislavski's system. Stanislavski's system. It's done by a Russian, if you're okay with that.
Interesting.
But yeah. So my wondering, with this is, did he go around for months like this character, which would have been super strange, but interesting at the same time.
Yeah. He would have had a new empathy for the character, I suppose.
Yeah.
He was very intense in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Him and his old unkie.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I guess, and I'm really glad you pointed this out early on in the season, but this is yet another movie with very, very few characters.
Yeah.
And it really focuses just on sort of that main guy and him sort of having a breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that for that style, or like that being kind of the main piece of the movie, I think the way that it was made sort of fit into that. It seemed kind of lo-fi and a lot of like just ambient, moody music.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some like good shots and good setup and like creative camera work, but it wasn't like it didn't feel like super produced, like from you didn't have a lot of computer generated graphics or explosions or anything like that,
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I think this is definitely like a more minimalistic,
yes,
style of filming. Very little cast. I mean, it was like 5 or 6 people, I think. Very limited. I think it was also based on like a book or something, or the concept. I don't know, man. It's based off something like that, like a short story by Matthew Holness. But yeah, it was strange though, because it was. So here's a thing that also ties in. We talked about cast. I'll try to make my way around. But the other thing I'm realizing what you run into is like, I am never going to ever watch a preview of a movie that we're gonna do, because 9 times out of 10 the preview of the movie is way better than the actual movie.
Yeah,
like it just doesn't. So like my expectation is, and we always try to preview it mainly so Katie can know what we're going to be getting ourselves into.
And then is it scary?
Yeah. Basically.
Did you pick this one?
Yeah. And but we try to do that, but with this one it was like, oh man, like something with a crazy spider, like that looks interesting, going through, and it's like, well, it technically involved that, but this is about like a deeper meaning, right? Like him carrying the baggage around of the abuse from Morris. That's what I kind of thought. But the way that they were able to kind of film it, it was almost like Wes Anderson doing a horror film, I felt like.
Yeah,
so like you would have the view through the door, and all of a sudden Philip would come like jumping down like he was a kid again, just like like a kid, but the view, the way it was shot was like that. And
then it just cuts to him like standing in the forest for no reason, and then cuts
just
back.
Staring.
Yeah,
they're standing at the school just staring.
Yeah, and I think from just like the aesthetic of the movie, I think it really worked. I feel like they used what elements they had pretty effectively from the way that it was made to like complement the feeling that they were going for. And my only other note on that was just that it wasn't like the highest quality camera.
Nah.
And for whatever reason, I kept like my brain made the connection and then I couldn't unsee it. But a bunch of the scenes really reminded me of the Walker Texas Ranger TV show.
Yeah, that's why I
just
liked
like
it.
in the way that the camera made it look.
Be careful what you say. Yeah, like MacGyver kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I thought.
Yeah, like,
well, the wooded area was why I was thinking MacGyver, because it always seemed like they were in northern California. But yeah, that's
but just
true.
like the and I don't know enough about the technical details to explain why this is, but just the quality of the camera, it looked like one of those TV shows from that era more so than a movie from 2018.
Yeah, and I think it was like it was filmed on like 35 millimeter, which is the old school kind of thing. So,
but I do think they had some really good scenes, some really good like artistic scenes, like that. The yellow and orange birthday balloons and like that black smoke coming up around them and like turning white around the edges and stuff, and some of the scenes where you would see the like the puppet head like partially buried in the mud and stuff. Like there were just some really good filler scenes like that, even though they didn't necessarily always tie into the rest of the movie super well.
Yeah, man, and I think the thing is with this movie that it had 95% of it wasn't horror. I mean, like the idea if he was abused like that from his uncle after his parents died and the fire. I mean, that's horrific. Don't get me wrong, but you find out about that at the end of the film. Like, I wasn't able to pick it up, leading into it. In fact, I didn't think Maurice was that bad of a guy until you figure out he was. I mean, you knew he wasn't, the greatest person, but it was just like, it seemed like, was he just trying to be goofy with the puppet and trying to get, Philip to come into the room or whatever he was doing? And,
I just was sure he was going to not be real at the end of it.
Yeah. That's the other thing too. I definitely thought, well, this has to be like some sort of dream or something, because I can say the plot of the movie really quick. Like a guy who you don't know anything about, you find out is going to his hometown, and in his bag he had a spider puppet, and he comes from a family of puppeteers, and all of a sudden, like a random TV turns on and some kid's missing, and then go on. He's starting at school. Maurice is kind of a weird guy. He leaves. Next thing you know, TV comes back on. They think it's Philip, the main character. Next thing you know, he goes to a basement where Maurice is, or goes to a building where Maurice is at, and it's him who was abusing Philip. I assume just hopefully physical, not, and then he saved the kid who was missing. And then it ended. So because you don't know anything about him at the beginning, the whole time I was thinking, well, Maurice obviously isn't real. Yeah. This kid isn't real. Just thinking like, okay, well, this stuff's not happening.
Also, the way that you told it included details that made it make more sense than the way the movie told it.
Yeah.
Like when a lot of that stuff was happening, you were applying things that you learned later in the movie back to things that happened earlier. Yeah. As you're sitting there watching the movie, it makes even less sense than what you just said. Yeah. And it did a ton of like jumping around in time and location. Yeah. And the dialogue was so weird. Like when Philip and Maurice would talk, it was like they were having completely different conversations. It was like you were hearing one end of the telephone when they were both talking to other people, and it just there was no like flow to it. It was just the weirdest thing.
It was super quiet and muffled too.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had in my notes that this one was really quiet, and it reminded me a lot of Session 9.
Oh, okay. Like dialogue wise?
Well, just the whole vibe of it.
Oh, yeah.
To where like everything was kind of quiet. You don't really know what's going on.
I was thinking the wind.
Oh yeah, I can see that too. But I did read that the director was super into silent horror movies from the 20s. Mm-hmm. And he was trying to write a modern silent horror film. So what he was going for was like using the visuals and the music to create the terror more so than the dialogue. And that makes total sense based on what we saw. I don't know that it was a particularly good horror movie, but it does. Like, having read that, I'm like, okay, I can totally see that.
Well, to me, it like poses the question of like, which we've kind of tried to go down that rabbit hole, which we won't have to today. But it's just like, well, what poses as a horror movie to people? Like, children being abused, 100% horror. You know, that's one of the worst things. You know, but for me, with this movie, like the whole idea of it happening is like, oh, that's terrible. But you know, watching a documentary with a kid getting tortured his whole life until he died, that's even worse because you know it's real life. But the thing is, though, about 95 or about 75% of the way through, 90% of the way through, it does have that section where like Philip is trying to find, I guess, Maurice, and like it has like the spider's head kind of popping up randomly throughout the whole thing. And like that was actually legit kind of like sketchy, you know. I was like, because you know me and the whole eyes thing, man, that gets me. And there was a scene where the puppet's staring through like a little glass thing through the door, and I was like, where has this been for the whole thing, for the whole movie? But at least, you know, the people who made this weren't assholes and made the movie, you know, 4 hours long.
So when this movie ended, I looked at the time, and it was like an hour and 29 minutes long, but I would have sworn it was over 2. Well,
see, I was kind of the opposite. I knew from just our conversation that it wasn't very long. Was the podcast, what do we call it, where we give them the secrets? But it was like, hey, we have to buy this one, or we can watch this one, and it's not very long.
And it's like, free.
He knows what to you know what to say to get me to do it. It's like, it doesn't even matter if it's free. If it's not a very long one,
and no reading.
Yeah. There's very few long ones I like, but yeah, and no, basically like anything that requires like intelligence, like I'm out. But anyway,
but like pacing wise, this one felt slow to me. And like you said, there were things that started happening towards the end that like caught my attention again.
Yeah.
But there was a long, kind of boring middle to this movie, and at an hour and less than an hour and a half, you should never feel that.
Yeah, and I mean the pacing was so bad that when it finished. And because I've been so busy lately, I was almost mad at myself thinking I could have edited a video or a podcast or something during this time and still knew exactly what was going on, you know? Yeah. As far as like, you know, because it kind of recaps at the end. But it was one of those ones too where I was just like, and I know like the movies that we've been watching kind of been a little down on, and it was like trying to find positives in it. And it's like, man.
Yeah.
I struggle with this, and I think a few people probably did too, making 33,000 worldwide, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was hard to try to pull positives away from it, I guess. But
all right, well, we're mostly at the end of my notes, which means now we go to a lightning round.
Yeah,
because every entertaining thing has a lightning round.
Yeah.
So here's the rules.
Okay.
Well, here's the setup.
Okay.
There was a lot of good horror imagery, but the lack of story really hurt this for me. I wish it had more slowly revealed what was happening, but so much of it just never went anywhere. And I wish the story was stronger. We have the opportunity to redeem this movie in my mind because I'm going to ask a bunch of questions about things the movie didn't explain, and I want you to just confidently answer however you feel like.
Got it.
Does not have to be what was in the movie or correct.
90% of the time it doesn't anyway, so I'm on.
All right. So you're going to give me some backstory. You're going to help me fill this thing out in my mind, and then I'm going to move forward feeling better about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 1. What was the thing that happened that caused Phil to have to go back home?
So he was on a road trip, and he came across an old puppet that he created when he became a disgraced one, and he ended up picking it up and had to go take it back to the place where he started puppetry to put it all behind him.
Okay. So there's a scene where he puts the puppet in a trash barrel and sets it on fire.
Yeah.
And then the puppet's not burned anymore like 5 minutes later. What was going on there?
Because he had the candy that his uncle gave him, and he was hallucinating.
So what was the deal with the puppet in general?
What's the deal with your puppet in general?
Fair enough. What were those green things in the jar?
Licorice. Hard licorice. Been there for 30 years.
That's
they
why
used
it
to be
made
red.
Okay. And so was the uncle a serial killer?
No. He's actually the pastor at the church down the street.
Oh. And a veteran.
I guess same thing.
Okay. So just to recap.
Yeah.
The story of this movie was Phil had gone on a road trip.
Yep. Go see some buds.
Had found this puppet and thought, my family is puppeteers.
Yeah.
So I obviously have the gift. And then he did so poorly that they laughed at him until he went home to reconnect with himself.
Right.
But then he got there, he met his uncle.
A very fine young man.
Yeah. And ate some expired licorice. And then had a fever dream.
Yep.
And then realized his uncle had kidnapped a boy, and that unlocked his own memories of being abused as a kid.
Yeah. But here's the thing that you didn't know about this.
Okay.
The boy that he actually kidnapped, it was really a 50-year-old midget who had been stealing puppets and putting them all over England.
Oh.
And in doing that, he was also really, he was hurting people too and spreading bad rumors about him. And
so the puppet that Phil found had been placed there by the 50-year-old midget?
Yep. And so really, Philip, who was trying to stop it at the end, made it worse. And he let the midget go when the veteran, the U.S. veteran from England, fought World War II, was trying to stop it all.
Yeah. Man, that expired licorice is a hell of a drug.
I'm telling you, man. I put some in the cabinet.
30 years from now.
Yeah, we're going to get so trashed, dude.
I'm so pumped.
I'm so pumped.
Take a trip. Okay, last question. What's Phil up to these days?
So here's the thing that people might not have noticed, but Phil is actually the autistic brother of Lloyd Christmas from Dumb and Dumber. He
same hair.
Yeah, same hair, same kind of walking mannerisms. But he's dead.
Oh.
Hung himself.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I'm just saying he was
like a dark turn. This is
from a tree that was about 3 feet high. Could have been an adult midget. There's going to be an episode on ID Channel about it.
Or a sequel.
Hopefully. Yep. Here's the thing. If you think about this movie legit, like you see it, it's like, okay, the way I see it is he was carrying that baggage with him, where it's like a metaphor, right? And he was trying to get rid of all the childhood drama that he was going through. Like, legit, that's what I was like, at the end, I was like, oh, that's what that had to be. Because, like, who knows why it was there and back and there and back. It was like, he couldn't get rid of it until he faced it directly. That's what I thought.
Just kind of a weird portrayal.
No, I agree, 100%. And I also thought, well, maybe the person who wrote this, like, had their own experience with it. And, like, that's how they felt it was. And how they felt they needed to get it out. And not taking a puppet back, but like how they were dealing with it, or I don't know, who knows where that stuff, but that's just what I thought. And it's just like, oh yeah, another movie that they label horror that's not really a horror. That's what I thought.
One thing I missed in my notes, I did have also that I felt like there were a lot of similarities to Babadook in that it had like the creepy rhyme and kind of the scary kids drawings to go along with it. But also in Babadook, the monster sort of represented the wife's or the mom's grief at losing her husband. Whereas in this one, the monster or the puppet creepy thing represented like his childhood trauma.
Yeah.
So I felt like there's like some connective tissue between the two on that level.
Yeah.
But as far as other movies go, which is kind of what we keep ending up talking about during this one, which tells you what we think of this one, you need to check out the movie Enemy with Jake Gyllenhaal. And the thing that made me think about it is it also involves spiders, but it had kind of like a similar kind of psychological, this is weird, what's going on type feeling, but was way better. It's a movie I've watched several times, and I think it's on Netflix now. So, or maybe Amazon Prime. I saw it on one of them. But anyway, Enemy. Check it out.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I was hoping that you were going to say this movie was a lot like Babadook in the fact that it wasn't like Babadook at all.
It was a lot like Babadook in that I want you to go in with high expectations and then be disappointed.
Yeah.
Is what the makers of the preview for The Wind said.
Also, the producers of this movie said, hey, at least it's not The Wind. What I was also thinking about...
Could have been longer.
Yeah. What I was also thinking about doing was writing out a top 10 list of movies that are scarier than this, but then make it all like children's movies, and the number one on the list was going to be Wizard of Oz. Just to like kind of talk about like my childhood drama.
Home Alone.
Yeah.